Okay, everyone, let's start the intention experiment.
Decide among yourselves who among your group has a health challenge. Do an intention statement together. Our intention is.
I have severe scoliosis and I'm in pain constantly.
I had retina damage. I was told I was going to go blind.
My liver had really deteriorated. I now had sclerosis.
Hold that intention statement. Bring it down to your heart. Send it out to the recipient. Recipient, just open up your heart to receive.
When everyone did the intention for me, I could feel like this little bubbling feeling.
I felt some tingling in the palms of my hands.
It was like an electrical current. It's like I had put my finger in the outlet.
And it gives me goosebumps right now even talking about it. But in that moment, I knew I was healed.
My name is Lynne McTaggart, and I am an award-winning journalist. I've written 7 internationally best-selling books, including The Field, The Intention Experiment, The Bond, and The Power of 8. And I am particularly interested in the power of thought to affect other things, particularly the power of group thought.
The intention experiments are a series of scientific studies to determine whether a group mind has the power to send a focused thought to directly change reality.
The findings were so extraordinary.
I have no doubts that with our intention, we can really change environment.
Not only can positive intentions induce miraculous healings in yourself and others,
their pain actually spontaneously disappeared.
there is evidence to suggest they can be used to lower violent crime.
Following that week of intention, violence dropped dramatically.
And even catalyze peace in war-torn parts of the world.
The peace is already here.
If we can have a thought and send it to someone else and make them better, that on its own undermines everything we think about how the world works.
I'm living proof miracles really can happen.
When I started out my career in my early 20s, I wanted to be a journalist, and my plan was to be an investigative reporter. And my first big breakthrough was breaking a number of baby selling rings, international baby selling rings, by posing as an unwed mother and then as a prospective adoptive parent. I moved to the UK in my early 30s, and I started getting interested in investigating health and medicine, primarily because I had gotten ill. Nobody conventional could figure out what was wrong with me. And finally, I got better by working with one of the country's first integrative specialists. So with my husband, we started a publication called What Doctors Don't Tell You. And in the course of doing that, I kept coming across really good studies of spiritual healing. And I kept thinking to myself, wait a minute, if we can have a thought and send it to someone else and make them better, that on its own undermines everything we think about how the world works. But I wanted to know, okay, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about just a subtle shift, like shifting a quantum particle? Or are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? Many people think that intention is a power thought. You do your meditation in the morning, you send out your power thought, and that's the only thing the universe hears. But actually, we're having thoughts all day long, and the evidence shows us that our thoughts are trespassers. They emanate inside us, but they also go out into the world. We're leaky buckets. So every thought we have essentially is an intention. At the time, I recognized 2 things. I knew a lot of scientists in consciousness research, and I also had a lot of readers. The field was in 30 languages by then. So I thought to myself, if I just put them both together, I'd have the biggest global laboratory in the world. And that's what I did. I started designing intention experiments.
My name is Konstantin Korotkov. I'm a doctor, professor, And I work in science for last 50 plus years. I found the book, The Field, by Lynne McTaggart. And for me, it was amazing, amazing. It was so well done, so careful, so precise. Because Lynne, she is not a scientist, and she doesn't claim to be a scientist, but she is brilliant.
I had heard about Lynne's work doing intention experiments, and I was intrigued by it. I'm Jessica Utz, and I'm a professor emerita of statistics at the University of California, Irvine.
It wasn't just the opportunity to do these kinds of novel experiments, but it was able to do it with someone who had the passion, the skills, the motivation, and the ability to communicate the findings to the world. My name is Gary Schwartz, and I'm a professor of psychology, medicine, neurology, psychiatry, and surgery at the University of Arizona, and director of the Laboratory for Advances in Consciousness and Health.
When we first started, I was looking around for a scientist who would be willing to do this and think about it, sending thoughts to a particular target by people who are scattered around the globe. So I approached Dr. Gary Schwartz.
I had met Lynne in England a few years earlier at a conference that we were both speaking at, and I was extraordinarily impressed by her interest in these areas and her desire to do real science.
We decided to start small. Now, for me, I wanted to save people from burning buildings.
She wanted to do the really big things. She wanted to show people that these things mattered, that you could affect a major health issue like cancer, or that you could affect violence in some meaningful way. And I said, slow down, Lynne. We need to get the foundation done first, where you can actually document something under controlled conditions that will give people some reason to believe that these bigger effects might be true.
I was crestfallen, but I understood, like any scientist, he needs to proceed one baby step at a time.
And so we started with leaves. We started with plants. The reason for measuring light being emitted by plants is because this light turns out to be correlated with the vitality of the plant and also the health of the plant. If you make a little puncture in a leaf, the leaf will then attempt to heal where it was injured. And when it does that, it emits biophoton light. So you'll literally see increased glowing in an area where an injury occurs. And it turns out that that light is reflected to the healing process.
We had 2 leaves. Gary had punctured each leaf about 16 times, and we had a live link to those leaves, which were in Tucson, Arizona, in Gary's lab, and we showed them to our audience of about 700-800 in London, and we did a 10-minute intention. And the leaf sent intention had so much light glowing through them that it almost felt like the other leaf was darker than usual. It had a kind of neglect effect. So it was completely mind-blowing.
The findings were so extraordinary. And when you see a very dramatic finding like that, and it's clearly innovative, and it's clearly going beyond conventional scientific thinking, it was stunning.
It suddenly said to him, as well as to me, there's something going on here. When we get together as a group with intention, that we can have a powerful, possibly even magnified effect. And then we moved on to something practical. We wanted to do an experiment to see if we could make seeds grow faster with our thoughts. We decided to call it the germination intention experiment. And for this, Gary's lab team would set up 4 sets of 30 seeds each and would label them A, B, C, or D, then photograph them then send them to me. For the first experiment, I was in Sydney, Australia. Remember, the seeds are in Tucson, Arizona. I had an audience of about 700, and I decided to run the experiment with them. We did an intention. We only did it for 10 minutes. After we were done, we told the scientists that was their cue to plant the seeds, and 5 days later, they measured them. And lo and behold, the seeds sent intention grew significantly higher than controls. Now, we ran that experiment 5 more times, and every single time, the seeds sent intention grew significantly higher than controls. The other thing that was pretty amazing about these early experiments was that many of them were run over the internet. That meant people weren't clustered together in a room. They were sitting in front of their individual computer screens, sending intention to a target that I had on my website. Nevertheless, it worked like a group mind. So I started realizing that there may be something like a psychic internet that gets created when people come together with a common intention. The reason I wanted to work with Dr. Konstantin Korotkov was that he was renowned as a scientist who had discovered an extraordinary way to measure the tiny currents of light coming out of the body, and from there to extrapolate the state of someone's health.
My background was quantum physics. As a physicist, I was always interested in different instruments that allows us to study human being. And I had no doubts for many years that together with physical body, we have our, I would say, energy field, biological field. And I was always looking for something that may be used to study this.
And his equipment had been used around the world. Many doctors were using his devices to diagnose patients. So I thought his equipment was perfect for measuring changes in things like water, but also human beings.
When she developed this idea of intention experiments, it was totally new. Nobody did it before. And so when she asked me, oh, can you participate somehow, I was very happy to be a part of this really very powerful experiment.
He is a true scientist who is interested in exploring the unknown. So we moved on to water and pH. Now that's the best measure of change in water because it shows it's getting more alkaline, which means it's purer, or less alkaline. We decided to do one on Lake Biwa, which is the mother lake of Japan. We had been invited by the late Masaru Emoto, who is what he called himself the messenger of water, a missionary when it comes to water, because Lake Biwa is highly polluted, and he wanted to see if group intention could help to purify it.
We know that 70% of Earth, this is water. 70% of us, it is water. Without water, life is impossible. So that's why I was interested to study properties of water, and I developed an approach how we can study photon emission of water. If someone can influence water in a sensor, then they can influence water in our body. And we start using water as a subject for experiments.
So I ran this experiment with Dr. Korotkov. We met in Japan at Lake Biwa. We took samples of the water. I gave Dr. Korotkov both samples. We randomly chose one of them to be the target water. I had a live audience there. We did an intention for it, and we were also hooked up to my internet audience around the world. So both sets of audiences sent intention to this water to make it purer, to make it more alkaline.
It was 2 samples, and of course I didn't know which is which, so it was a blind experiment. And I did measurement, and I found that they are different. There are two different types of emission from water. And then it was found that sample that had very high emission, it is sample that was under the intention of this big group.
We had an extraordinary effect. We moved it by virtually an entire pH.
It was really amazing because I'm always skeptical. I never believe in anything before I have some proof, some evidences. In this case, it was absolutely clear. It was really amazing effect, amazing. And for me, it was exciting. I have no doubts that with our intention, with our focus concentration, we can really change environment. We can influence not only other people, but we can influence our environment.
I started to grow a little bored with seeds and water and leaves. And so one day I called up Gary Schwartz and I said, let's do something huge. Let's try to end a war. Let's try to lower violence with our thoughts.
And there was research published with transcendental meditation where the claim was that a group of people engaged in meditation for some period of time, not minutes, but much longer than that they observed an actual measure, a decrease in reported violent incidents.
So we noticed in their studies, people didn't do intention, they were just meditating, but they'd done this over about 8 days. So we decided to do an 8-day experiment, but we had to find a target. This was exceedingly hard when it comes to a war, because no country wants to talk about the bodies. No country wants to reveal the actual numbers of deaths and injuries that go on. I decided to work with Dr. Jessica Utz. She'd worked in consciousness research for many years and would well know how to take a strange situation like this, a group of people sending thoughts to end a war, and try to make something of it.
I started working in consciousness research in the late 1980s, so it's been many decades now that I've been doing, mostly working with people doing laboratory experiments. I had heard about Lynne's work doing intention experiments, and I was intrigued by it. And so when she reached out to me and said that she thought she could get some data and that we could do a statistical analysis, I was very intrigued and interested and willing to take a look.
Eventually, it was finally suggested that we focus on Sri Lanka.
The Sri Lankan army is on the move. This is the northern frontier of the country's civil war. But 10 years, the Sri Lankan security forces have been fighting Tamil separatists. Now, according to Tamil reports, the army is about to launch a new offensive.
I managed to get hold of the Foundation for Coexistence, and they were keeping careful track of weekly deaths and injuries, and had done for years beforehand, and were tracking it virtually in real time.
I believe it was weekly data, and so I could actually use a statistical method called time series to look at the trends over the past few years and then predict what should happen if things continued as they had been all along. So we could predict how much violence there should be in the next few months and then compare it to how much violence there actually was in the next few months following the experiment.
We had about 15,000 people from 65 countries around the world, not just Europe, but far-flung places in the Far East. And we all sent intention for 10 minutes over 8 days, culminating in the lighting of a candle throughout Sri Lanka, which the Foundation for Coexistence had organized. And then we had to sit back and wait for the results. We were shocked to see that violence immediately erupted during the week of our intention. In fact, it quadrupled.
That was quite startling, to say the least.
So I started to get really worried, thinking, did we do this?
And we were thinking, ooh, what's going on here? And then it dropped dramatically.
But then it plummeted down by 75%, around that. But that wasn't the most amazing thing that happened.
Jubilation on the streets of Colombo as Sri Lankans celebrate the end of nearly 3 decades of bloody conflict. Peace won't be easy, but most agree that the time for reconciliation and rebuilding this shattered land is now.
We discovered later that the government had won a number of decisive battles that turned around the entire course of the war.
It was just so striking that these two events coincided so nicely, that the intention experiment ended and that week was when the actions started that brought about an end to the war.
Now, did we do this? Short answer, who knows? There are many variables in a war, but it was extraordinary that the very week of our intention turned around that entire war and ultimately was the cause of ending it.
It was next stage, because it was not just only like laboratory experiments or just scientific experiments. It was experiments centered on influencing a big group of people, influencing society as a whole. And it was really a huge move.
So that gave me another idea to run a peace intention experiment for the Middle East. I had the opportunity to use different equipment this time that enabled me to put cameras in 8 different locations in Arab cities. The 9th camera was in an audience of Israeli Jews. I had to broker the entire experiment because the Arabs weren't speaking much to the Jews. The Jews didn't want to speak to the Arabs. And it was difficult. But with this equipment, we could do this intention together. And afterward, I could call on the different parties and they could talk to me and the rest of the audience together.
Jeddah in Saudi Arabia.
I saw myself there and I felt very strong love for the Jews in spite of our raising up to hate the Jews. Beautiful feelings, beautiful images of unity, oneness, love, and peace.
We live in Jerusalem. We know it personally. And I've seen images of hugging, of soldiers and Arab people, of kindness one to another, of flowers all around Damascus Gate. This is so emotional.
Yes, you're on Abu Dhabi, right? Are dancing. The Palestinians, they hug each other, and we are with the Israelis, like we share peace and love, which is an amazing thing. And I want to thank you and everybody participate in this participation.
Tunisia. I love you so much, and I feel full of love and full of peace. Your God is my God. I love you.
My name is Lily from Jerusalem. It's so overwhelming, the possibility to be connected with you, our sisters in Amman and in Damascus and in Iran and all over. We are thousands, hundreds of thousands of women here saying enough. It's about time to unite. We are one.
So that was extraordinary to me, that it doesn't just heal violence. It doesn't just change people's lives. It also brings people together.
We were able to demonstrate that people, both Palestinians, Israelis, Arab, Muslim, Christians, they may be united together, maybe. It's only some political forces, political leaders who try to separate this and to make this as war, what we have now. That's why it is so important to generate this type of experiments, to generate this type of meetings, and to teach people that we are all same. People have very powerful power of their consciousness, and then it's detected by sensor. No doubt that it's really worldwide effect that comes on the, I believe, on the level of information field.
We had run numerous peace intention experiments, but I wanted to run one that was really almost unassailable. So this time, I had the idea to choose the officially most violent place in America. At that time, 2017, it was St. Louis, Missouri, and particularly one area of St. Louis called Fairground.
St. Louis Metropolitan Police trying to piece together what happened after they found 2 people dead in South St. Louis.
It has been a violent 24 hours in St. Louis, a string of deadly shootings, including a suspicious death, all within hours of each other today.
This time, we did a study with Gaia, and we did it over 6 days with time each day for our intention, and afterward, we sat back for 6 months patiently to wait for the results.
We had St. Louis as a whole, and we had the fairground area, it was called, basically to predict, for example, what was going to happen in October of the year that you did the intention. I could look at the trend for October over the past few years, plus the linear trend that had been going on. And using those combination of those two, I could predict how much crime there should be in both St. Louis and Fairground. I could predict what those should be, and then look at what the actual crime was in those situations.
The trajectory seemed to be that violence was growing year on year on year for St. Louis as a whole and also Fairground. When we analyzed it, though, after our experiment, we found violent crime, the object of our intention, went down by 43%. And none of the neighborhoods around Fairground enjoyed that kind of drop. This time, it was hard to say that this was only down to chance.
I think the St. Louis experiment was more convincing to me than the Sri Lanka experiment because we had the control situation of St. Louis as a whole. And so I was more convinced that it was the intention and not some other explanation for the St. Louis data. I was particularly struck because the numbers became so small. So as I recall, the predicted numbers for person crime were on the order of 6, 7, 8, that sort of thing. But the actual numbers were more like 1, 2, and 3 for the month. Those were monthly numbers. So it was really striking. You could actually see this drop.
This was a very clean study. We had comparisons with St. Louis as a whole and other areas around Fairground. And Fairground stood out as the only area that had experienced a drop in violent crime. So it was becoming harder to argue with that.
Okay, we ready? Please take a deep breath. Inhale and exhale.
That human intention marshaled for high intentions. The idea that all of this can pool and contribute, it is, to me, extraordinary. And yet, the research is the research, the theory is the theory, and we should follow it.
The results of the peace intention experiment were pretty amazing. But to me, the most amazing thing wasn't what was happening to the targets. It was what was happening to the participants. They were writing back things like this. I felt like I was part of a higher network. I had extraordinary visualizations. I felt like I was there in Sri Lanka. They were getting along better with their partners. They were making up with their children. About a third to 40% reported an improvement, if not a downright cure, in some condition they had. We experience life in separation, like lonely people in a lonely planet, in a lonely universe. But suddenly we come together in groups, and we are not alone. And we are in a brain state where we actually experience the field. We experience a mystical state of oneness. And that, I believe, is where the real miracles start. Around 2008, I decided to shrink down group intention to a workshop setting. So I was kicking around the idea with my husband and our team one day, and I said, maybe I'll put them in groups of 8 or so and have them send intention to some member of the group with a health challenge. And my husband, who's also a journalist and a great headline writer, looked over at me and said, I love it, the power of 8. And that's how the name got started. So we put people into groups, we had them send intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. We told them to finish up that day and come back the next day of the workshop, and then ask them one by one if anything had changed, not expecting much besides feel-good effect. That's not what happened.
Let's share. Let's share a little bit of what happened. Did anyone have an extraordinary experience they want to share? Tell us your name.
I've had severe scoliosis since I was very young, and it's gotten worse as I get older. And part of the intention was that I wake up, without pain in the morning. And I could feel, it was like an electrical current between it's like I had put my finger in the outlet. And I could feel everybody's energy coming to me. And I have not been without pain where my hip and rib touch for a long time. And right now, there's no pain. I'm just so blessed right now. This is a miracle for me.
Thank you.
It really is.
Thank you. Fabulous. Well done, group. Well done, group.
I jumped out of bed this morning. I raised my hands up in the air. Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. My dog thought I was crazy.
Months later, I was checking in with her and that pain was still gone. So I really believe that power of 8, the energy of healing, the energy of our minds is just unbelievable. Now, seeing the energetic healing physically of my mother from Lynne McTaggart's Power of 8 was just mind-blowing. Really spectacular.
I'm Lori McLeod. I'm 64 years old and I live in Colorado. Approximately 9-10 years ago, I started noticing that my eyesight was really failing. And I went to this eye doctor and she said that she felt like I had retina damage. It was getting to the point that I couldn't even hardly see to walk. I was knocking things over off the counter because I couldn't see the glasses. It was impacting my life quite a bit at that point. I was even wondering if I was going to be able to continue to work. I was told at that point there was nothing that they could do. I was going to go blind. It was really devastating and it was scary.
I'd like you to formulate that intention that you decided on together. Imagine that intention just unfurling like the leaves, the fronds of a fern.
So when everyone did the intention for me, and during those 10 minutes, I could feel this little bubbling feeling. It's hard to explain, but I could feel things happening in each of my eyeballs. That's all I can say, deep into my eyeballs. It was almost like if water was bubbling. And in that moment, and it gives me goosebumps right now even talking about it, but in that moment, I knew I was healed. And I was just so filled with love and gratitude for the group that really held that space for me for the healing.
You can see the picture?
You can see that picture.
You can see the picture in the hallway?
I just started crying. My daughter was with me and it was the most joyous moment in my life. And my daughter actually took me for a ride, and it was the first time in 9-10 years that I could actually read the street signs. And if it wasn't for this intention, my retina damage would still be causing blindness. So the power of intention has healed my retina damage, and I'm currently seeing 20/20. Very powerful.
Now, I was really frightened by this because I thought to myself, well, I'm not a healer. I thought that this was going to mess up my important investigative intention experiments. But I was intrigued.
So I'm Lisa Pickles, from a small village in West Bradford, in Lancashire, in Great Britain. I was diagnosed with alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency that was deteriorating my liver. 2018, I got the letter that said that my liver had really deteriorated. I now had sclerosis of the liver, and also my spleen was enlarged. So the conventional doctor was saying, you know, there isn't anything at the moment, there's still trials being done. It could look like a liver transplant. So really, really scary outcomes. I've got 3 young children. I'm clearly really panic-stricken, you know. I went down lots of not very nice rabbit holes. So when I got the diagnosis that things had really deteriorated, I was on this new path, a spiritual journey, and I'd gone to, obviously, the Power of 8. And I was sitting in the Power of 8 circle. I felt some tingling in the palms of my hands, but nothing really in the circle. It was that evening when I saw the most profound green light in my inner eye. And then what I felt was like a cold sensation that was all around my torso. And then I felt this shooting of cold air going out of my left foot with this green light. So I got a secondary letter after the Power of 8 healing, and this is what it said. Dear Lisa, further to your scan on the 5th of November, I am very pleased to say that your liver, biliary tree, gallbladder, pancreas and kidneys are all normal. In particular, your spleen is of a normal size and appearance. We also measured any evidence of fibrosis within the liver, and there is none. I hope you are reassured by this, and we look forward to seeing you in clinic in due course. Best wishes, Dr. Healing.
There are intention effects, no doubt. Intention is something that affects things outside ourselves. There are group effects. Psychologists call it a collective effervescence. We're revved up when we're in a group. There's also altruism. That is a key piece here, because altruism, when you look at the science of altruism, it's like a bulletproof vest. People who do things for other people live longer, healthier, happier lives. So I believe the act of selfless intending for someone else, whether in a small or a large group, doesn't just heal the target, but clearly gets mirrored in the intender.
Thanks for joining us today, Andrea.
Wow, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to share my story.
My name is Andrea Spiros, and I'm from Los Angeles, California. And my group did intention for me. I was doing it around my career because I was feeling so lost, and nothing was really happening. And I was feeling a little bit frustrated. And during the classes, weekly classes, Lynn would give us advice. So I would ask Lynn, hey, this is going on and nothing's happening for me. What should I do? And she'd give me some advice, and I'd come back the next week and it wasn't really working. And I was feeling very frustrated. And one day she just said, you know what? Get off of yourself. Stop intending for yourself. And intend instead for this other young man, Luke, who had thrown himself off a building and was in a terrible state. And so we stopped intending for me, and we intended for Luke. And I think it was only a couple of weeks later, out of the blue, from an unexpected source, I got a job offer that was perfect for me and my previous skill set. I was in complete and total disbelief. I basically said, like, that's bananas. How can this be that I can stop intending for myself, that our group can stop intending, and yet things can happen? I directly attribute this to the Intention Masterclass, the Intention Circle, and the power of altruistic intention. Because it was only when I stopped intending for myself, when our group stopped intending, that actually happened. I think altruism works because it's a little bit like not watching the pot boiling. When we're focused on someone else, we're not focused on what we don't have for ourselves. And I think when we're not focused on fear, lack, uncertainty, and we're not putting that out into the world, that we end up getting more of what we want.
I'd seen many, many things, but I wanted to find out what was going on inside their heads. Was anything changing in my participants' brains? I was lucky enough to speak one time at Life University. They were intrigued by the power of 8, and they suggested that Dr. Stephanie Sullivan, a neuroscientist at Life University, run a study with me.
Perfect. Okay, that'll work. My name is Dr. Stephanie Sullivan, and I'm the Associate Vice President for Research here at Life University. Working with the Power of 8 research was completely new for me. We selected kind of a case series protocol where we recruited 7 different groups that were different Power of 8 circles to come into the lab. And then within each of those, then we had one individual we were measuring their EEG, and then another individual as the target. When we went into the study, to be honest, we didn't really know what we would expect to find since this was a new area of research for us. We did look at the literature, and meditation was naturally one of the things that we thought about. And we noticed in the meditation literature that there were changes in the brain, and regions of the brain tended to increase.
So these weren't people who were meditating. These were people whose brainwave signatures looked almost identical to those recorded by Dr. Andrew Newberg, who is a neuroscientist, then of the University of Pennsylvania, who studied brainwave activity with Sufi masters during chanting and Buddhist monks during ecstatic prayer. Our student volunteers, like these Buddhist monks, like these Sufi masters, were in a state of ecstatic oneness. They were having a mystical experience. But here's the amazing part of it. They didn't require years of study and practice. All they had was a little video from me giving them some basic pointers, and yet they were able to have a fast track into the miraculous.
We noticed an overall decrease in the activation patterns of the brain, or in a sense, the overall noise of the brain, especially on the right hemisphere. The right parietal is that area that is really focused on the sense of self, more so than the left side of your left parietal regions. So it's interesting that it was that right parietal region that really seemed to decrease, especially as the person was thinking about someone else instead of just focusing on what's going on within themselves.
It was stunning, and it was more amazing to us because these young volunteers were total novices. They'd never even meditated before. And yet they were having this extraordinary feeling and connection of oneness.
All of the individuals reported kind of an increase in elevation in their mood and a decrease in some of those negative thought patterns. So in addition to measuring the individual's mood, then we also wanted to assess for their pain, because some pain is something that can affect both the body and the mind. And what was interesting is after the intention, even for individuals who weren't the target, who weren't actually receiving the intention, then many of them, their pain actually spontaneously disappeared. So that was really interesting to see. So not the person receiving the intention, but the individual actually sending the intention to the target person. I think that was one of the the most impactful things. I genuinely was just in awe of the changes that occurred just over that single session.
It's very important to prove and demonstrate people that they are not just physical body, but they are much more than that. They have energy field, they have their spirit, they have their soul, and if we understand this, then we change our attitude to each other and to life itself.
When one does frontier science, one is going to confront disbelievers. And one has to accept the fact that unless you've actually done research and experienced these things yourself, it's just very hard to believe.
I have encountered many disbelievers, and I think I'm in an interesting position because I can say, look, I'm not going to take a stand on this. As a statistician, I can show you data, and you can interpret it however you will.
I don't care. Everybody should have its own choice. Either you want to develop, you want your spirit be higher, you want to live a happy life, you want to enjoy life, or you want to be stressed, you want to be in anxiety, you want to have problems every day, and you want your life to be miserable. It all depends on us. And first of all, on our attitude to life, on our intention to make our life better.
I was told that the only real outcome would be a liver transplant. And through one session from the Power of 8, I had profound healing. So people, the disbelievers out there, it's in plain black and white. I'm living proof that I'm a healthy, now nearly 50-year-old woman, and miracles really can happen.
I'm living proof that it does work. Intentions are very powerful. And I also want to say to the disbelievers is if there's any bit of you that has hope for something, hang on to that hope and really dive into that hope and have faith that it will happen, because it does happen.
The conclusion that I eventually came to in my life, which I apply to this work, is that some things are too good not to be true. And the idea that positive human intentions among shared people devoted for higher purposes can have positive effects on life. It's just a beautiful thing. And the fact that science can validate that deserves to be celebrated.
You have amazing power. You've just experienced it. It's there within you. We can heal ourselves. We can heal each other. We can heal the world. Thank you so much.
My work with Gaia has been wonderful. We have a common goal in empowering you and everyone out there in the evolution of consciousness. And to that end, we are running a live intention experiment. And we want to invite you all to be part of this. We're going to be focusing on an area of high violence in the world that needs our help right now. So I invite you to be part of this global endeavor. We're going to have people joining us from around the world so that you can see the power you hold inside of yourself, the thoughts you have, and what they can do to heal you, to heal each other, and to heal the world.